everyone, and welcome back to the Affirmation Addict podcast. My name is Pyle, and today we are talking about one of my favorite topics ever, which is the power of your word. And I think this episode will give you a lot of really good insight as to why my entire business, why my kind of oh my God, this is such an old school way of saying it. Why my I was gonna say screen name, which is a very old thing. Why my username is Affirmation Addict. Why my podcast is the Affirmation Addict podcast, but I'm not only speaking about affirmations. And the truth is your word, every spoken word especially, is an affirmation. Whether you want it to manifest or not is a completely different story. But with the way the universe works, with the way energy works, every single word we're speaking is being sent out into the universe, is a signal that our subconscious mind is responding to, trying to make come true for better or for worse. And I think just when I hear different conversations with friends, we've just been to a lot of weddings, and with family, even just the conversations that are being had. I love everyone in my life so dearly, but I sometimes am just like, oh my gosh, do you even realize what you're saying? Do you even realize how that's manifesting for you? And even deeper, with all of this knowledge that I have, when I'm around specific people and anybody, my natural response is to kind of mimic and respond and speak in the same way that they're speaking. So I'll say things that I don't even believe are true. And once you start to kind of take note of that and acknowledge that, you'll realize how many of the words that are actually coming out of your mouth are probably not actually what you mean. And it is such a powerful thing because honestly speaking, every single word you are saying is an affirmation. Is it an affirmation that you want to manifest? Most likely not, which is normal. We're not always going to speak in positive terms. We're not always going to talk about every single thing that we want. So I'm not asking you to just speak positive all the time anymore. What I'm asking is to just reflect and take note of the conversations you're having, because the power of your spoken word is there. That's why they call it spelling, right? Like it's a spell. Your words are casting spells. The words you're speaking are casting spells, as well as the words you're writing down. And like, think about those conversations when you're texting your best friends. Maybe you're filling them in on drama. Maybe you're catching up with your coworkers and complaining about something that happened the night before. Like, all of that is perpetuating and recycling and circulating energy. Is it energy that you want to keep going? We're not sure yet. And that's what we're going to kind of dive into. And I hope that this episode can make you really, really think about. So, in short, I really do believe your words are your wand, which is why I have, for the longest time, always spoken about affirmations, not just the positive statements you're using to reprogram your mind, but the conversations you're having, the things that you're listening to, the text messages and emails that you're writing down, the little chats you're sending your coworkers in the middle of the day. Like, all of that is a signal being sent out. And that can feel really overwhelming. It can be like, okay, well, can I not be funny? Can I not talk about stuff? That's not necessarily true. But what I am asking you to do is just take note and see the percentage of conversations you're having that are like uplifting, high vibe versus the percentage of conversations you're having that are venting or maybe releasing. And I think there is so much power in venting and releasing, but how much of it is actually venting or releasing and how much of it is just complaining and recycling what you don't want to happen anymore? So it's a really interesting topic. It is a little bit touchy because I am not asking you to never speak a negative word in your life, but I am asking you to see where there's a little bit room for improvement and notice how it shifts with the different people that you're around, because that's one of the biggest things I've noticed. Certain people in my life have very specific like money mindsets or have really, really, extreme mindsets about like food or what they're eating and like diets. And I personally, I think I've spoken about this on the podcast before. Like, I have worked really, really hard to heal my relationship with food, with my body, not demonizing specific foods and not hopping on crash diets. And there's people who are very close to me in my life, who that is their normal reality. And so when I'm with them and they're talking about food, I'm in my head like, this is not my truth. It is a very interesting space. But if I spend a lot of time with them where I am not kind of putting up my barriers and my boundaries, then I start to notice those thoughts seeping into me, even though they're not even mine. So the power of not only your spoken word, but everyone else around you spoken word. And that's why they say like the people you spend the most time around is who you become. But don't let that scare you, because you can outweigh like the people in your family or friend circle with people online that inspire you. Maybe you want to hang out with me. Maybe you have other people online that really inspire you and that actually kind of align with where you're trying to make your life go and the beliefs you're trying to embody, or books and different audiobooks you can listen to. So all of these are different versions of connecting and raising your vibration while also being intentional with your spoken word. So it's a very, very important topic to me that I think seeps into so many areas of our life. And I hope you're kind of understanding the point I'm trying to put across. And overall, I really do believe we are always affirming, but how often are we affirming what we actually want? If I just reflect, right? Tom, this is something he always calls me out on. I just like always comment on the weather and the temperature, and I'll just say it's so cold. And he's like, you literally can sit in 38-degree or 39-degree water, Fahrenheit, so it's like kind of cold. So he's like, you can sit in that kind of water, but the moment you feel like windiness, you always have to say it is so cold. And I'm like, I'm just making a statement. And yes, I am just making a statement, but I also understand where he's coming from, where he's like, yeah, but it's also kind of a complaint. Like, you're not saying, wow, it feels so nice, it's so cold. You're just saying it's so cold and you're like sitting there shivering. Like, that comes off with not as good of a connotation. And I think it's the most annoying thing. And I literally am like, Tom, let me just say that it's cold outside. But he's not wrong. Like, am I going to stop saying it's cold outside? Most likely not. However, it's like these simple statements we're making that permeate through so many different layers and have so many different vibrational inclinations, where it's like everything is connected. So yeah, when I go outside and I'm saying, oh my God, it's so cold, I'm not saying it in a positive way. I am complaining. And I get defensive with Tom because he always holds me accountable and always humbles me. But I am not asking you to never complain. All I want you to start noticing is how many of the statements that you're making, even if they're seemingly innocent, right? Like you're talking about the weather, or you're saying like food is too salty, or it could be better. Like, you're not wrong, but also how is it serving you? And it makes me check my ego all the time. Like, another example, right, is food. I freaking love food. And I'm going to sound so arrogant right now, but I cook really well and I have a really good palate. It's just something I think a lot of Indian people like. Food is the baseline of half of our relationships and half the way my family and I bonded together. So like food, I'm good at food. I know how to cook, but I also like know what good food tastes like. Like, we go to really good restaurants, but we also go to holes in the wall. And it's like, when I eat with friends, like I notice how much like food can really bring ego into play. And all you're commenting on food, you're commenting on someone else's food that they've cooked. Like, it's not any of our friends that we're insulting, but the underlying comments and like the energy that they're carrying is so telling in that moment. So for example, we went to dinner with friends and there was like a long wait, in the sense where like you aren't allowed to sit down. If you've made a reservation, you're not allowed to sit down until the entire party gets there. So a few of us were running a few minutes late, like literally 3 minutes, but they still wouldn't let our friends sit down. And they were so annoyed. They're like, oh my gosh, like red flag already. And I'm like, this is literally one of my favorite restaurants. It's not a big deal. Like, it's their rules. They made it really clear. Like, they emailed us multiple times and said, if you're not here on time, or if your entire party isn't here, we won't seat you. So it's like, it wasn't surprising. They communicated to us, but they were just offended, like egotistically, right? Like, they're offended that you're not letting us sit down. We're in an establishment, we're your customers, etc. So that was one layer where I think like our ego and energy can really come to play. And the words that we're speaking, our friends immediately started complaining about that. And I was like, literally, it's in the email. I screenshotted it to everybody saying, you can't be seated until all of us arrive. So it's like, I don't know what you were so surprised about. But then the food came and everyone's like, this is so good, but it could be a little bit better. Like, there could be a little bit more saltiness, or I'm really getting these notes. And it's like, how much are you just like criticizing and speaking like to one up or show how much you know food, and how much could you just appreciate how good it was tasting, even if there could be some improvements. And I know this can be contradicting because it's like, okay, then does everything have to be perfect all the time? That is not what I'm implying. Not saying you can't have your own preferences, but the way you share those preferences, I think, is so telling. Because also, coming from me, I am a recovering people pleaser, and I will just say whatever you're saying, or I'll just agree to agree and not create conflict. However, I am learning that I do have preferences. And those are really strong preferences, but I'm learning how to share my preferences in a non condescending way and a non-egotistical way. You can share your preference without putting somebody else down. And I think that's a really fine line. And it all comes down to the way you're saying it, the vocabulary you're using, the tone you're using, and all of these little micro moments that we're having these quick conversations are impacting our entire vibration, and your entire vibration is impacting what you're manifesting. And it might seem so unconnected, right? Like, why does a dinner with our friends have anything to do with this? It's because the way you're talking about something can really seep into and give you a reflection on the way you talk about other things. So something as unrelated as critiquing food at a restaurant, even if that's like fun for you, how are you critiquing it? Are you critiquing it in a way where it's like, I'm better than you, you can't cook? Or is it just like, oh, like I would prefer it to be a little bit more sweet or a little bit more salty, or I wish it was a little bit less spicy, but it's still really good? Those are two very different tones of voices, right? And I think there is so much empowerment around speaking your voice and speaking your truth. And I think an extreme case is speak your truth unapologetically. But I also think there is a way where you can be unapologetic without being led by your ego, without seeing a hierarchy. I think that is a really, really beautiful fine line that I am trying to master, because I have gone that one extreme where it's like, I know I'm better than you in my head, right? Which is so false. But I've showed up with that energy. Didn't serve me that well. I've also showed up with the energy where it's like, you know what? I'm just going to be non confrontational. I'm not going to trigger you. I'm just going to agree with you. And both of them left me very unsatisfied. So, what I'm currently discovering is, how can I speak my truth honestly and not let it come from an egotistical space, and not let it be led from a place of arrogance or from a place of just complaining, and that kind of, as a catch-all, a negative energy. I think it's a really subtle shift, because it can feel empowering and powerful to speak with arrogance or speak with like conviction and be like, yeah, I know this. But how much of it is actually just kind of stroking your ego, and how much of it is actually serving your energy to what you're trying to manifest? I went a little bit on a tangent there. But just to kind of prove my point, I really do believe every single word we speak is an unintentional affirmation. And I don't say that to scare you. I only say that for you to just have a little bit more intention in the words that you're speaking. And it's a process. Like, for me, a big topic that I've noticed me trying to shift the way I speak is around money. Everyone in my life like uses the word expensive, and in my head, like, I hate that word. So I have made a conscious effort for a really long time, actually, probably like 6 years now, to not use the word expensive, because personally, like, the energy that expensive brings up to me is I can't have it and I'm not there yet. But what I'm really meaning, like, what is it I'm actually trying to say when it's something is expensive, is that it's more valuable than someone is charging more value than I see in it. It's not that I can't afford it necessarily, even if that's true, but it's really more about, it's not worth that in value either. Because if you think about it, when people are assigning prices to money, it is very arbitrary, and value is a perception. It is not a fact, right? You will see this on shopping. You'll see this with clothes so much, where maybe not like a designer luxury bag, but like in clothing, it's all about fabrics. And most of the fabrics of expensive clothing brands are also not that nice. And see, I just use the word expensive too. And it's not because I can't afford it necessarily. And I don't want to put that energy out. It's just that I don't feel like it's worth that value that they're putting on it. So it's just like a misalignment of value rather than a misalignment of abundance and resources. Because when it comes to money, I'm not trying to create more lack. I am always trying to step into more abundance, as I think we all are. Like, we're always willing to grow, receive, have, and give more, which is the definition of abundance. So I don't want to perpetuate like this energy of, no, I can't afford it, it's too expensive for me. More so, whether or not I can afford it is irrelevant. I just don't see the value in that. So what if there is something that is expensive that you cannot afford and you do see the value in it? What do you do in oopsies? What do you do in that situation? For me, in that situation, I say it's not ready for me yet, but at one point it will be mine, or something better will be mine. So you don't have to still call it expensive. You can say, oh yeah, like I'm not there yet, or I don't feel ready for it yet, but I will soon be ready for it. So rather than making it mean something about you, it's just now is not the right time. Eventually it will be, though. And that can imply so many things. Maybe someone gives it to you. Maybe you get it for free. Or maybe you are able to like have more financial resources to actually purchase that yourself. So it can mean a lot when you start to understand the different topics in your life and how people are talking about them, how you are talking about them, and what words and what energies and what undertones that are kind of going on in your head are showing up as you're speaking about these things. So this can be overwhelming to tackle for every area of your life. So my recommendation is to start with one area of your life that you're working on. Maybe you're working on manifesting your soulmate. Maybe you're working on manifesting your dream job or more money, or you're trying to kind of get more fit and work on your health. Whatever area that is, focus on that area for the next week and just observe the words you're using, what you're talking about in that category, and how the people around you are talking about it, and then the conversations you're having in that category. Think about how many of those are aligning positively and kind of progressing you to that, and think about how many of those conversations and words are complaining or just calling out everything that sucks about it. Because it's easy to do both, but most often, from what I've observed, at least the people I'm around, is it's usually a complaint or a lack mindset rather than how can I get there? What can I do better? So there's nothing wrong. You don't judge. You're not judging those people. You're not even judging yourself. It's just an intentional change that you can make to help you raise your vibration more. Another way of communicating that is so not helpful, and Tom once again has called me out on this, is self-deprecating humor. When people say, like, make fun of themselves to create humor, or to just not trigger other people. I didn't realize I did this until Tom told me. He's like, so we were in Costa Rica for a friend's wedding. We did like all these adventures. We did river rafting. Tom went spearfishing, like all of these cool activities. And the river rafting we did was like more intense than usual. We've done river rafting before, but there was like some really cool stuff that we did. And we were telling our friends about it. And basically, as I was telling the story, I was like, oh yeah, like usually I'm so scared. And I would always justify anything cool that we did by humbling myself or making myself just like lesser than, rather than just saying, yeah, like I actually wasn't scared at all. And it was so much fun. And even though I was completely submerged underwater, I was fine, shockingly. Like, see, even then I said shockingly. It was like, I have to justify that I actually did something well that most people don't expect me to do well, or most people don't associate me with. Like, most people do not associate me with adventure and being adventurous, which is so valid because I have not always been that way. But ever since marrying Tom, like, adventure is a big part of our life, and especially his. So I have naturally been a lot more adventurous than I've ever been in my life before. And I actually love it. And I am pretty fearless for the most part. And if I'm not fearless, it's usually mental, and I take it as something that I can work on. So it's just so funny because we talk poorly about ourselves to kind of use it as like a common ground and a breaking point, which is fair. Like I get it in some situations that that's necessary, but is your body and your soul and your heart is listening to you, and is it fair to do that to yourself? No. Is that in alignment with how you want to be in this world and your highest and best self? No, it's not. And just realizing like the different ways that we're holding ourselves back and creating more misalignment, just through the power of our words and the conversations we're having, can be super eye-opening. So I found it really helpful whenever I'm at weddings. We were at a wedding or with a lot of people and meeting new people. I think it's really interesting to notice like the way I talk about myself, the way I talk about my business. I used to say I have a small business, but it's not small. Like it actually isn't small. So why do I have to do that to make it feel less triggering for people? But how can I say I've built a really cool business without coming off and believing that I'm better than you? How can I just share it with neutrality or appreciation for myself without making somebody else feel bad? So it's kind of like a fine line of owning where you're at while being honest about where you're at, while also being considerate of other people's feelings without being a people pleaser. It is so contradictory. I totally can hear myself and I get why it is contradictory, but that's the fine line in manifestation and in the words we speak, because every single thing you're saying is creating energy. And another thing, when you're talking about your manifestations, when you say, I want that, wanting energy cannot coexist with having energy. So maybe when you have something that you really desire, just say, I can't wait for that to be mine. That doesn't scream want, that screams, I know it's coming. So realizing even the way you're talking about your specific desires and what you're manifesting, instead of saying, I wish this or I want that, wishing and wanting is very different than having and knowing. Wishing leaves it up to chance. Wanting is literally affirming that it's not yours yet. So if you change the words and the way you're speaking about your manifestation, it has to change the way that that manifestation is vibrationally being attracted to you at this moment. Like it is law, it is the law of attraction, it is a law of vibration. It makes a difference. So that's one of my favorite kind of tricks, is getting really intentional with my words. And something that I've recently been doing is literally looking up definitions of words, because we'll say a word and like not know what it actually means, and looking up what it means to you also. So someone might not think expensive means anything negative. For me, expensive means I can't have it. It's some programming, but for you, it might mean luxury or premium. So maybe expensive isn't like a triggering word for you. I think for most people, they say it in a negative connotation. So that's why I've worked really hard to reframe and choose a different word. So I don't want to perpetuate that energy in a conversation. So I'll just say like, oh yeah, like it's a more, you have to pay more for it, but that's your choice. So it's literally not a lie. I'm just choosing not to use a word that creates a lot of like a ripple effect, because every single word you're speaking is creating a ripple effect in these things. So it's a really, really fun way to manifest and to kind of work with your manifestation every single day, whether you're talking about the specific desires or you're just talking about the area in which whatever you're manifesting is. I think it's a really fun way. A few tips on how to activate your voice, because this is all in kind of that throat area, because we are talking about the spoken word more, is do some throat chakra exercises. One thing that I have done for my throat chakra is I will just like make noise. Like I hate making noise. I literally am cringing thinking about this, but if it makes you cringe, it's probably good for you. But just like see what noises come up. Like, do you want to like hum, or do you want to, I don't know, some people grunt. Like some people grunt at the gym. I don't. I stay silent. Some people scream. Like I scream. Like if I'm scared, I scream. There's a lot of situations where I do scream. So think about, how can you activate your voice more? Maybe it's singing. Some people are big singers. Maybe it's like reciting poetry, whatever it is. Think of a way where you can actually use your voice, and maybe it's just humming or chanting if that resonates with you, or speaking your affirmations out loud is a way of activating your throat chakra. The next one is asking yourself what feels like truth for you. This conversation and the power of your spoken word, it is going to look different for everybody. The words that are kind of no's and yeses are different for everybody based off of what your definition is. I can't tell you what expensive means to you. I can't tell you what toxic means to you. Like for me, toxic is like feels like poisony. So I hate using that word because it just makes me feel not okay. So I use unaligned. Unaligned feels way less heavy to me than toxic. Even if something is toxic, I don't want to perpetuate that energy in any way. So I just use unaligned or I use bad vibes. It feels way better to me. So think about what's true for you. Maybe some of the examples I gave you aren't in alignment, and that's okay. Like we don't have to have the same definitions of all our words. And lastly, spending time with just yourself to say what's actually on your mind and in your heart. The best way to do this is journaling and stream of consciousness journaling. So, grabbing a notebook, having no agenda, no plan, and just writing. It's a really good way to actually see what thoughts are on your mind, to get a window, kind of like a bird's eye view into your soul, into what's going on inside. I know there's a lot of resistance around journaling. I know there's a lot of questions around journaling, but literally just write. You cannot mess this up. Put a timer for 10 minutes and just write. Even if all you're writing is, I don't know what to write, it is such a powerful technique. And you'll start to find your voice. You'll start to find what are your thoughts? What are your insecurities? What are your fears? What are your beliefs? What do you actually want? And it's a really good tool to feel comfortable with as you dive deeper onto your manifestation journey or to deepen your manifestation journey as itself. So I hope this episode resonated with you. I hope you got some interesting insights to explore this week as we just continue forward. Next week, I have a really fun episode all about reprogramming your beliefs. So I hope you tune in for that. And just to call out, if you like the podcast, I literally record this like from my room. I don't do ads for anyone. I don't get paid for this. It's completely free. So what really, really helps me is honestly just your reviews, whatever podcast platform you're listening on. If you enjoy it, a review would mean the world. A written review, I read them all. It makes me so happy. It would mean the world to me, and it helps the podcast get seen by other people too. So just a little request, if you have 30 seconds, please, it would mean the world to me. So thank you so much for being here. I love you, and I will see you next week. Bye.